Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. Today we will discuss about Pakistan's bizarre allegation that India is fanning terrorism in that country. Pakistan is known for coming up with gimmicks from time to time. The latest is the bizarre concoction that India is fanning terrorism in Pakistan and that it has so-called information and evidence regarding it. Its Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has claimed that India has prepared a plan to destabilize Pakistan. Indian government has already rubbished it as figment of imagination. While we are sure that nobody in the world would pay heed to such atrocious claims, we will try to analyze in the agenda today why Pakistan has made such a claim. We have with us retired Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, who has served as Director General of Military Operations in the Indian Army. We are also joined by Mr. Jitendra Kumar Oja, who is an expert on geostrategic affairs. But before we begin our conversation, let's have a look at this small report.
Pakistan has come up with a bizarre claim that India is fanning terrorism there as part of a plan to destabilize the country. The claim was made at a press conference addressed by Pakistan Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, interestingly with military spokesman. Qureshi claimed that Indian intelligence agencies are patronizing banned outfits which are against Pakistan like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Balochistan Liberation Army and Jamaatul Ahrar. He claimed that Pakistan has information and evidence regarding it. He said Pakistan will share the dossier with the world. India aptly rubbished the claim, terming it as figment of imagination and another futile anti-India propaganda exercise. External Affairs Ministry spokesman Anurag Shrivastava said the so-called proof that Pakistan claims to have is fabricated and a deliberate attempt on the part of the Pakistani establishment to shift focus from its internal political and economic failures. He pointed out that Pakistan itself is a factory of producing terrorists and Pakistani leaders have not shied away from accepting this fact. Srivastava said Pakistan's claim will find new takers as the international community is aware of Pakistan's tactics and the proof of its terror sponsorship has been admitted by none other than its own leadership. Baloch leaders have also rubbished the claim and said if they had support from any country including India, they would have achieved freedom by now. Clearly Pakistan is desperate to divert attention somewhere else as it is under intense global pressure, including from Financial Action Task Force, which has placed it in grey list for supporting terrorism. Bureau Report.
Now let's welcome our guests, Lieutenant General Bhatia and Mr. Jitendra Oja. Welcome to the program, sirs.
Thank you.
Jai Hind, sir. My first question is to General Bhatia. Pakistan, you must have heard about claims by their foreign minister about India fanning terrorism in Pakistan. What is your comment on that?
I think it is again one of those, what Pakistan believes in, lies, deceit and denies. It has got nothing to do with terrorism or India's role in it. It is more for their own consumption, domestic consumption. They have enough fault lines of their own. If you look at it, Pakistan itself is the epicenter of terrorism. And now they're trying to blame India, just trying to internationalize the issue, shift focus from Pakistan, shift focus on the FATF. So there are multiple reasons for this. And mainly it is the Pakistani army. You have the DGISPR and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan giving a joint statement. And this comes immediately after a Prime Minister's statement. It comes immediately after the line of control has seen violent ceasefire violations. The intensity very high out there. And there's a reason to that density being high, which I will cover later. But if you look at all these things which are happening, and Pakistan also has seen this opportunity to blame India for creating trouble in CPEC, because especially targeted CPEC to get China on its side. So this is Chinese, the Pakistani way of pulling in China, interesting the whole issue, and blaming India for terrorism, where it continues to be the terrorism center of the world. Anywhere where terrorist acts take place, 80 to 90% of the times there's a direct or an indirect correlation to Pakistan or the terrorist attack anywhere in the world.
In fact, General Bhatia, I found it very interesting that foreign minister of a country is holding press conference with a military spokesperson. Can you imagine that happening in India?
No, we don't. We don't have a military spokesperson. We have a MOD spokesperson, Minister of Defence.
No, I mean we have ADGPI. If we call him the military spokesperson.
ADGPI is for public information, but he's if you don't normally find him doing spokesperson. It is unheard of that the Foreign Minister of India and the ADGPI will be in platform. But that is what the relevance of the Pakistani army is. Pakistan army drives the India policy. It also drives the strategic relations of other nations, Afghanistan, US, Russia, China. If you look at it, even when Prime Minister Imran Khan visited Washington, it was the Chief of the Army Staff, General Bajwa, who did not actually accompany him, who was given more of importance. And everyone, a foreign dignitary of any importance, any relevance, visits Pakistan. He first visits Rawalpindi, which is the headquarters of the army, and then goes to Islamabad, which is the seat of the government. So it is the Pakistan army drives that. It is the domestic relevance which is more important to Pakistan army. And that is how you find the DG ISPR and the foreign minister on the same platform. I think it is really unheard of in any other democratic nation, any other society, or any other people.
That is why I call it Pakistan a funny country. Now I'll turn to Mr. Oja. Mr. Oja, what is your first comment on Pakistan's this, I'll call it, bizarre allegation?
Thanks, Jaji, for having me on this program.
Our pleasure, sir.
I would tend to agree with General that Pakistan believes that through lies and deception, their propaganda can sway some people. But those who know the subject, they are very clear that this kind of allegation is aimed at domestic audience. They would like sweeping powers for the armed forces. All these years, they have painted threat from India, and in the name of threat from India, what they have done, the army has controlled all levels of state power. So I think this is a step in that direction. And I would go a little further, that how ridiculous this charge is, because terrorism is not a crime of passion that somebody just commits it. Whole world knows you. The entire counter-terror experts from all over the world, they know that Pakistan has been running terror factory, because ingredients of terrorism are what? First, psychological propaganda. They are one people who have preached and practiced a very radicalized version of Islam, especially the military establishment of Pakistan has been propping up this version of Islam through their cronies and stooges in Pakistani radical civil society, you can say. And I'm not saying it. Some of the best experts of CIA who have now become, political sociologists and professors, they have pointed it out, how Pakistani nationals of Pakistan coming all the way in the whole of Europe, they have created a large number of, I would say, pools from which these terrorists have been recruited all over the world. So I would say, and secondly, organized crime. No other country on this planet has as much grip over organized crime as Pakistanis have, because without organized crime, you cannot fund terrorism. So this is ridiculous. Without these 3-4 ingredients, psychological propaganda, logistics support, and a fragile governance system, which Pakistan is known for. You have pointed it out, how in a country like that, the Chief of Army Staff gets more importance than even Prime Minister of that country. So all these things are very clear indicators. This kind of propaganda is aimed at domestic audience, whereas that can give army to usurp more draconian authority and power for themselves, because terrorism is a very lucrative business for Pakistani ruling syndicate, and they are not going to give it up. And they have always considered that through propaganda, they can hoodwink sections of population. Unfortunately, in the past, the West was finding this kind of propaganda very convenient, but after 9/11, things have changed. I think India has to take, I would say, much more proactive steps and measures which should go beyond their diplomatic condemnation. We should do everything possible to deny space for their subversive activities on our soil, and at the same time we should work with all the countries in the world, all the developed countries and all the democracies in the world to expose their, I would say, their deceitful criminal syndicates or terror syndicates which are operating all over the world and primarily targeting India.
Mr. Oja, as Qureshi has said, Foreign Minister of Pakistan has said that Indian agencies, intelligence agencies are supporting banned groups like Balochistan Liberation Army. And I have also read reaction from the Baloch leaders, Baloch rebels, saying that if we had support from India, we would have been liberated by now. What do you say on that?
Look, people in India may be very sympathetic to Balochis because not only Balochi, Pakistan is a state which is dominated and controlled by Wahhabi Sunni version, Wahhabi Sunni Punjabi Muslims, and rest of the people are being persecuted. And we all know that India's policy is not to support terrorism in any form, and Balochis are fighting for their liberation. And I don't think that government of India has gone beyond moral support. So I would 100% agree with claims of Balochi leaders that had there been a support from India, Balochistan would have been liberated long back. I would say people of Pakistan need to be liberated from this criminalized syndicate. Large number of them are operating outside the world. They have been de facto controlling territories in Pakistan through Taliban, and that area, the amount of drug money that is generated from Afghanistan and a very extensive machinery which is operating all over the world. I would not say only Pakistani, there may be some non-Pakistani elements globally, and they find it extremely lucrative. So they have to come out with this kind of anti-India propaganda. More hatred they spread against India, it will help them in recruitment. So that is why this radicalized version of Islam, which is hatred towards Hindus. So this is one thing I would say, one of the primary flanks of Pakistani ruling syndicate. They have used it to, radicalize sections of their own population. And that population has been used in terror and crime and all these activities.
Right.
And what happens because of this? They have managed to hoodwink their own population, as we said. They have managed to hoodwink sections of international community. At the same time, this has helped that ruling syndicate retain its very strong grip over entire state and society, and this is very detrimental to people of Pakistan also. As a democratic country, we would like, that people of Pakistan come up as normal human beings and they live and they mind their own business and pursue their own ambitions.
Right.
But the biggest enemy is not India. The biggest enemy is this ruling syndicate of Pakistan. So I think this whole thing is geared in that direction, Ajayji.
General Bhatia, if I talk about timing, I think timing is very significant because we have seen in the recent weeks or over a month or maybe two, there has been a kind of popular democratic movement which is directly targeting the army and its proxy government, Imran Khan government. So do you think, would you agree that it has something to do with diverting attention from that to India?
I think you're absolutely right. It is basically the timing, it is basically the internal fault line with Pakistan which has manifested in what has happened in Karachi, what has happened along and the line of control also is saying it has got what's happening internally. And this movement which has really picked up, it is anti-government, it is anti-army, and for the first time, there has been a voice against the army as such, and that too by the police, and there's a mass policemen who have sought leave of absence from the place of duty, which is unheard of. And even in the code of Bari which was done at the base of the army, if you look at what is open in the public domain, it is a very benign sort of punishment which is given. They just get moved away from the place of duty and then the action will be taken. So this is all encompassing. This is what Pakistan Army has done. This is what Pakistan has done. I still feel that the Pakistan is controlled by Pakistani Army, not by the government. It's got a puppet government. It's a very smart move which Pakistan Army does out there. It used to do coup earlier. And moreover, what it's trying to claim India is a responsible nation. India is a resilient nation. And the world believes in India. We are emerging world power. We are a global leader.
Right.
We cannot condone what we condemn. We condemn terrorism, all its forms and all its manifestations. And Pakistan, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. It is the hub center of terrorism. It is the epicenter of terrorism. It is the fountain of terrorism.
But sir, if I may interrupt you, India has not only condemned, we have been fighting, we have been the victims of terrorism for over 4 decades.
Correct, absolutely right. We will be victims of terrorism, which Pakistan says is a proxy war. Pakistan's philosophy of leading India with 1,000 cuts. And this was started way back. It has been 4 decades now. And we have had attacks on our national institutions as the parliament, our state assembly in Srinagar. We had attacks in the places of religious places, Akshardham, in financial centers in Mumbai. So you name it, we've been through all these, not only army installations I'm talking about, but all over. So Pakistan has actually, had got us embroiled in all these things. And they thought that they will be able to do this in perpetuity and with impunity. But things have changed in the last 4-5 years, especially after the surgical strikes post-Uri, after the precision airstrikes after Pulwama, recently the Pulwama is there. So Pakistan has realized that it cannot go on. And now it is changing, and especially after Article 370 has been abrogated on 5th August 2019, Pakistan dilemma, it does not know how to now handle Kashmir policy. So what Pakistan is trying to do, it was trying to raise the NK along the line of control and divert the attention. When that did not work out, this press conference came directly blaming India for whatever is wrong in Pakistan. Everything that is wrong in Pakistan is blamed on India. They have quoted, I don't know where they get this script writers from. I think even Bollywood will be proud of such script writers. Their imagination has really gone berserk in this.
Like Pakistan has done it, is claiming so because it is under pressure, intense pressure, world pressure, particularly from FATF over support to terrorism. So he's trying to maybe distract the world attention, or could it be like that?
Yes, definitely. It is under pressure on the FATF front. It has only got the support of 3 countries, as we all know. It is on the grey list, and India, of course, is trying its best to put on the blacklist. It's been speaking to the world, and the world understands that. Everyone understands what Pakistan does and what Pakistan has done all over. Osama bin Laden was in Abbottabad when he was neutralized by the American special forces out there. So there is a doubt about it out there.
And he was the martyr, sir. Sir, he was the martyr for Imran Khan.
Absolutely, he was martyr Imran Khan. He was right there. And if you find all these peace failures and Masood Azhar and all, they get state sponsorship. They get trains to move people. They have their social media calendar out there. So all this has been engineered not by these terrorists who know nothing about anything. It has been engineered by the Pakistan Army and the Pakistan ISI and by the Pakistan government. So we have to fight this out, and India has been very well. I must say that India has been well. The Indian intelligence agencies are. We have to look at internal thing, and we look at external thing. Our counter-information bid is good. Our counter-terrorism bid in Kashmir is good, and our agencies are doing a wonderful job inside. Of course, there will be terrorism. They only have to succeed once. Whereas the intelligence agencies will succeed 100 times, no one comes to know. But when a terrorist succeed once, it's all blamed on intelligence.
Right, Mr. Jitendra Oja, if I ask you the same question, Pakistan is under intense pressure from FATF and all. So, do you think the world would pay attention to whatever Pakistan is saying, because it is saying that they will share the so-called dossier with the world to unmask India and all that?
Ajay, I would like to rather put a note of caution here that in 2019 report of this Asia Pacific group of FATF on countering terror finance, there were 41 members. And the report very clearly pointed it out that Pakistan had not adhered to any of the major guidelines, and there was huge loopholes. That report itself was good enough for Pakistan to be placed in blacklist. Pakistan, we mentioned some time back that at Abbottabad, Osama bin Laden was caught. But still nothing has happened to Pakistan because world's action has not been proportionate to the crime that Pakistan has been committing against the entire humanity. And all major powers, including France, including UK, etc., they kept quiet on non-adherence to FATF guidelines by Pakistan. What has happened even in Afghanistan? Americans depend to a great extent on Pakistani goodwill to extricate themselves. So by involving and getting involved in terrorism, Pakistan has managed to acquire massive global clout. And most of the countries, including countries in the West, they rely on goodwill that Pakistan has with terrorism. So this is one area we have to be very clear in international sphere. There are no friends every country has a right to act in an opportunist way, and they do act in an opportunist way. Otherwise, Pakistan would never ever have become a nuclear power, and it should have been blacklisted long back. So, and their wealth from organized crime, from drug trade, from counterfeiting of currencies, from laundering money, that wealth of this small syndicate is very huge. And this amount of money has been used. I am not saying it. A lot of investigative journalists have pointed it out, how Pakistanis have used this money. Americans have, got this thing, some patriotic officers of American security establishment. They came and they started exposing it, and they put their foot down. Otherwise, Pakistan has been using this money to do what? To get favorable propaganda for themselves. And thus, they have managed to fund a lot of politicians. There was one eminent case of George Galloway, who was a radical, despite being a Britisher, a radical pro-Pakistan element. So we have to be very careful. Even NHRC, they have been going and they have been painting stories. So we have to be very careful, Rajeshji, because the world may not necessarily act in the fairest possible manner. There would be elements in international community who would be dictated more by their interests. There would be elements even within democracies in the world who can be subverted. So we have to see that what Pakistan is doing is not simply a speech of words. Propaganda is an integral component of irregular warfare, like terrorism, like subversion, like insurgency. So what Pakistan is doing by this thing, indulging in propaganda, indulging in yet another form of irregular warfare, and we have to be careful. Why we have to be careful? Because a few years back, you remember, highest level, there were some, what should I say, I don't have appropriate word to describe, somebody was raising a bogey of Hindu terrorism. This
Right.
was most ridiculous, not only for me, but for anyone who has studied and taught and practiced this subject. So I think, in this thing, as a government, as a state, we have to approach this thing with utmost caution, and we have to see what is there between the lines.
So, Mr. Oja, as you mentioned that some democratic countries could also be subverted. So,
Yes.
could you, is there a possibility, or maybe could we think that it is because Biden is taking over the US administration and he is seen to be kind of pro Pakistan and has some views against India, so it could be a bait to him?
Oh, not really. You see, American government system is a little different. Of course, President Trump was one person who had become very unpredictable, and he was so unpredictable, especially the Chinese feared him, Pakistanis feared him, and these two countries he certainly disliked. There is no doubt. He was the man with strong personal likes and dislikes. But as far as Biden is concerned, he is also influenced a lot by, you can say, left liberal lobby and people who talk about human rights. Human rights is always an independent lobby, like trade representatives you would have seen even during President Trump's era. The USTR, like Heiser, he has not been all that charitable towards India. So within that country, there are multiple lobbies, and within that, one president or the other president leans against one or the other. Somebody has more interest. So what we need to be careful that human rights lobby in the American establishment, they have, they are likely to be, influenced. They are likely to be wrongly influenced. And here, lot of
So that was my question.
no, let me complete.
Could it
Let
be
me
to influence
complete.
Biden?
No, let me complete.
Yeah.
Let me complete. Here, we have not been acting smartly, and despite a nationalist government, despite a nationalist prime minister, these subverted elements within the police and criminal justice system, who were subverted already in the previous regime by this Pakistani drug crime mafia, these elements continue to flourish in India in different sections. They are not in media, but under the radar, these elements remain very powerful, and these elements continue to harm our capacity to fight this covert war from Pakistan. To your channel, I would like to appeal to Honorable Prime Minister and Honorable Home Minister to pay very serious attention, because our system has been subverted for a long time. To allow this Islamic radical propaganda to go on, to organized crime to flourish, despite Dawood being in Karachi. We all very know that this underground activities or this crime world has been flourishing, continuing with its activities, and they cannot continue with something like this without collusion from malignant sections of our criminal justice system. So, and similarly, there would be elements within the political, civil society and media, and the whole thing can blow out of proportion. And here, I think as a state, as a country, as a government, we need to be very, very smart.
Okay, we are running out of time. One brief comment from General Bhatia. You heard Mr. Oja what he said about subversive elements within the country also, which we have to be careful about. Any brief comments on that?
Yes, I think we'll have to be careful. We are careful. It's not that every country will, every nation will look after its own interest, but the ideology is also there. I think the US will do what is right, and today India, like I said, is an emerging power, and that even US understands that. US policies will have to look after the American interest, and American interest and Indian interest aligned right now. We have a strategic partnership, or more than a strategic partnership. And everyone knows that India is a country which doesn't support terrorism, which fights terrorism. We are a victim of terrorism. And even Afghanistan, for that matter, if I may take a minute, Afghanistan immediately came out with a government statement saying that they never let Afghanistan use their territory for any activities, terrorist activities against Pakistan. So Pakistan is actually isolated in this policy. It's just trying to garner some support. I don't think it's going to get any support.
Right. Thank you.
Just one sentence on that, Ajay.
Yeah.
As far as the strategic ties, Indo-US strategic ties are concerned, these are on an irreversible momentum. And security and strategic matters, our cooperation is likely to go on. But in certain issues, we have to be careful that, there's a human rights lobby and other lobbies. These are not influenced, and within domestically, we act smartly.
So basically, nobody in the world is going to pay heed to Pakistan, but we can't be complacent. We have to be careful. But thank you both of you for participating in this debate.
Thank you very much.
This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.